We don't sit where we want. We sit where we think we deserve to be. He walks into the room and, without thinking, chooses the chair that's left. Not the one in the light, not the one at the center, but the corner seat. The one no one else picked. There's no pause, no internal dialogue. His body simply moves there like it always has. It's not humility. It's conditioning, the kind that gets into the bones before language ever arrives. He doesn't believe he deserves comfort. He doesn't even realize comfort was an option. Eric Berne called this the power of script, the unconscious patterns we inherit and repeat until they feel like personality. This isn't a conscious choice. It's the role he's played since childhood, the accommodating one, the understanding one, the one who doesn't take up space. The posture is slightly collapsed, the gaze always checking, not for permission, but for absence. Where will he cause the least inconvenience? That's where he lands. And worst of all, he's never complained. Because people like him when he's easy. And somewhere along the line, easy became the opposite of real. Today, something catches, a brief tension in the chest as he sits. It's not pain. It's awareness. This isn't about chairs. It's about a pattern. A physical agreement he's made 1,000 times. I'll be smaller so others feel bigger. I'll stay quiet so the room stays calm. But for the first time, his body notices the cost. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to stand before choosing again. There's a type of laughter that doesn't rise from joy. It rises from fear. You've seen it before. Someone makes a joke at his expense, and before anyone else reacts, he's already laughing. Not because it's funny, because it's safer to join in than to risk standing alone. That laugh is not amusement. It's a transaction. Learned early, rehearsed often, and rarely questioned. Eric Berne taught that children adapt to the emotional economy around them. If defending yourself leads to tension, but laughing along keeps things smooth, the body learns to smile through violation. Not just once, but habitually. Over time, the smile becomes automatic. Muscles lift, eyes drop, the jaw tightens, all while the nervous system goes into retreat. It's not a joke anymore. It's a survival mechanism. A performance he perfected so well, he doesn't even feel the collapse happening beneath it. That's the tragedy. He doesn't know he's in pain because the smile has become a cage. A structure designed to absorb insult while appearing resilient. But the body knows. The shoulders are tight at night. The breath is shallow. The stomach flutters for no clear reason. The mind says, I'm fine. The face agrees. But the nervous system keeps the real score, and it's exhausted. Not from harm, but from pretending it doesn't hurt. The biggest lie you believe is that your life is yours. He thought he had made choices. School, career, politeness, responsibility. He could list the decisions that led him here, the times he said yes, the things he pursued, the people he kept close. But lately, a question keeps circling the back of his mind like a slow leak. What if none of it was actually mine? Eric Berne warned us long ago. Most people don't live their lives, they live scripts. And most scripts are written by age 5. Not in sentences, but in signals. Non-verbal, pre-verbal, often invisible. Not, you must do this, but, we smile here. We don't argue. We help quietly. We don't make things harder for others. And if you hear those things enough, or simply feel them in the air, your body adapts before you even understand it. There's a moment he remembers now, so minor it would never have seemed worth recalling. He's 7. It's dinner. His sister cries, their father sighs, their mother goes silent. He feels the mood shift. No one asks anything of him, and yet he pushes his plate away, tells a joke, and makes the room laugh. It works. They all breathe again. And without knowing why, a role is born. You're the one who smooths things out. The tragedy is that it feels like personality. He grows up believing he's just easy, adaptable, calm under pressure. But none of that came from freedom. It came from necessity, a child's unconscious calculation that peace in the room is more important than truth in the self. So when he later becomes the reliable one at work, the one who never says no, the one who handles everything, he doesn't question it. When he dates people who drain him but praises them for being difficult in a beautiful way, he doesn't pause. When he wakes up tired but still answers every message, smiles at every stranger, and agrees to every request, he calls it generosity. But the truth is sharper. He is performing a script that isn't his. He begins to see it physically. His decisions feel like movement through fog, as if every yes is already halfway out of his mouth before he considers what it costs. The hands do what they've always done. The face softens at the right time. The voice stays calm even when the stomach turns. It's efficient. It's polite. It's killing him slowly. And here's the question Berne would pose. Who wrote this? Because somewhere in this smooth, socially graceful man is a child who made a deal. I'll be easy if you'll keep loving me. And decades later, the contract is still running, still shaping what jobs he applies for, still choosing how late he stays to help, still silencing his anger with a smile. He starts noticing it in the smallest places, in how he never leaves a group chat, even when it drains him, in how he automatically says, no worries, even when he's deeply frustrated, in how he never corrects someone who misjudges him, because explaining would take up space, because being misunderstood still feels safer than being honest. And then, one night, sitting alone with his laptop open, he sees it clearly. His calendar, his inbox, his social circle, it's not his life. It's a document full of other people's handwriting. Every task, every expectation, every scheduled call, all written in a font that isn't his. He's living in a script where the plot doesn't even need him to think, just to keep showing up. For the first time, he wonders, when was the last time I rewrote a scene? When was the last time I said, I don't do that anymore? No answer comes, just the cold realization that being nice had a cost. He disappeared somewhere inside it. But maybe this is the first true line he gets to write. I don't want to play this role anymore. When you've lived for others too long, even kindness feels suspicious. He didn't expect the compliment. It was small, casual, almost a throwaway. Someone at work said, you're incredibly reliable. I honestly don't know how you do it. They smiled and meant it. There was no sarcasm, no manipulation, just a moment of genuine acknowledgement. But his body responded as if someone had thrown a punch. First, his jaw tightened. Then his eyes dropped, almost involuntarily. He nodded and laughed, brushing it off with something modest. It's nothing. Just doing my part. But inside, his stomach flipped. Not with pride. With confusion. Discomfort. Almost shame. Eric Berne called this reaction a sign of script violation. When something true breaks through, and instead of relief, you feel panic. That compliment didn't land softly because it didn't match the inner story he's always lived. You are useful, but you are not special. You are tolerated, but not praised. You are the glue, but never the frame. And when someone speaks to something deeper, to actual worth, the body recoils because it doesn't know where to place it. He starts noticing it more after that. When someone says he looks well, he instantly insists he's just tired. When someone calls him smart, he corrects them. Just experienced, not really smart. Praise feels like confrontation, like being seen in a way he hasn't prepared for. Because if he is, in fact, strong, capable, worthy, then the entire role he's played becomes unstable. The script that justified his silence no longer holds. It's not just emotional. It's physiological. His shoulders lift when someone compliments him, like he's bracing for impact. His breath catches, not from flattery, but from threat. Because the moment someone sees value in him, he is forced to confront a quiet, terrifying truth. If I am good, why have I allowed so many people to treat me like I'm not? And the next thought hits harder. If I've had power all along, why did I choose powerlessness? This is the first time he recognizes a pattern that isn't about external behavior. It's about internal permission. Somewhere in childhood, the transaction was clear. Don't expect praise. Be helpful, not exceptional. Be unnoticed to stay safe. And now, decades later, the nervous system is still operating under those terms. Compliments become dissonance. They don't align with the internal map. And instead of integration, he chooses doubt. But something in him is tired of flinching when kindness appears. Something deeper, maybe older, wants to test what happens if he just lets the words stay. So the next time someone says, you did that really well, he doesn't deflect. He doesn't shrink. He just nods, quietly. And though his jaw still tenses and his chest feels exposed, he stays still. Because maybe the real transformation isn't about becoming stronger. Maybe it's about believing the truth when you finally hear it. When you stop explaining yourself, you find out who you were trying to convince. It happened quietly. No confrontation. No outburst. Just a moment. Someone misunderstood him, clearly, perhaps even unfairly. They raised an eyebrow, made an assumption, moved on with a half-dismissive tone. And for the first time, he didn't chase the correction. He didn't launch into justification or reframe the moment to protect his image. He simply let it land and left it there. The silence that followed wasn't empowering. It was uncomfortable. His nervous system lit up, heart rate increased, mouth slightly dry, a small internal buzz like something was off. Not because he was guilty, but because he had spent a lifetime managing how others saw him. And now, by not controlling the narrative, He felt temporarily exposed. Eric Berne spoke of this shift as crossing out of the script, no longer functioning in the role you were assigned. And for someone raised to be agreeable, comprehensible, easy to digest, this is rebellion at the cellular level. He was trained to be likable not by nature, but by necessity. If they misunderstand you, they might not like you. And if they don't like you, they might leave. That belief, unspoken, unexamined, had driven decades of over-explaining, oversharing, overcompensating. But here, in this simple moment, he didn't send the follow-up text. He didn't write the clarifying email. He didn't replay the conversation in his mind to rehearse what he should have said. Instead, he sat with the discomfort and noticed that, although his stomach felt unsettled, nothing actually broke. The world kept turning. The relationship didn't shatter. The misunderstanding didn't consume him. The approval he always sought, never guaranteed anyway, didn't vanish because he stopped chasing it. What vanished was something else, the illusion that being fully understood was required to feel valid. He realized he'd spent years trying to be translated, trying to mold his message so it wouldn't be misread. But in that effort, he'd often compromised the message itself. And now, not explaining didn't feel like neglect. It felt like trust. Not in others, in himself. Because if you know who you are, you don't have to argue with who you're not. The message sits there, still unsent. A half-typed clarification that trails off into nothing. He looks at it, then deletes it. Not because he doesn't care, but because for once, he doesn't need to be agreed with to feel whole. And in that space where the explanation would have lived, something else finally breathes. Presence. Saying no isn't hard because you don't want to help. It's hard because your body still thinks it's dangerous. It was a small request. A favor, really. Something he could have done without too much trouble. 10 minutes of his time. A minor inconvenience. The kind of thing he'd agreed to 100 times before, automatically, without thought. But this time, something paused. Something held back. Something said, don't. So he looked up and said it, gently, clearly. No, I can't. And the moment those words left his mouth, his whole body reacted. A spike of adrenaline. A flush of heat behind his ears. A tight pull in the chest. Not because the task was meaningful, but because the refusal felt like risk. Not a risk of conflict. A risk of losing the role he'd played all his life. Eric Berne would explain this as the script being challenged by new behavior. When you've lived as the helper, the fixer, the accommodating one, saying no doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like betrayal. Not of others. Of your survival strategy. Because the first no shakes more than the moment. It shakes the foundation. He walked away after saying it, calm on the outside, but trembling underneath. Not because he feared the other person's reaction. They had nodded, accepted, moved on. But because his nervous system didn't. It kept asking, did you just make yourself unsafe? Did you just break the contract? The contract, of course, was invisible, but it had always been there. You will be loved if you are useful. You will be safe if you are agreeable. You will be okay if you say yes. And now, the terms had been violated. Not loudly, not dramatically, just peacefully. And that's what made it powerful. This wasn't a rebellion. It wasn't anger. It was something far more dangerous to the old self. Clarity. He saw how often he'd said yes just to keep peace, to be liked, to feel momentarily valid. How rarely he'd checked whether the request made sense for him. And how quickly he'd learned to feel guilt when prioritizing his own boundaries. And now, with just one no, he'd interrupted a lifetime of silent compliance. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt raw, like watching glass shift, realizing what he always thought was a doorway was actually a wall. One he'd been walking through again and again, cutting himself quietly, pretending he was just clumsy. But now the illusion is broken. The wall is seen, and standing in front of it, for once, he doesn't try to break through it for anyone else. He simply walks the other way. You find out who you are when you're not needed. He sat in the room, and no one needed him. Not in a cruel way. Not in rejection. Just no one turned to him. No one asked for advice. No one expected a solution, a reaction, or even a polite nod. And for the first few minutes, he felt the instinct rise, that pull to insert himself, to adjust the dynamic, to make things better somehow. But he didn't move. Instead, he let the silence happen without interrupting it. He let the conversation pass without joining in. He let the discomfort breathe. And in that pause, something became clear. He had spent years trying to be necessary, because being necessary felt like being allowed to exist. Eric Berne described this dynamic through the drama triangle, the repeating roles of rescuer, persecutor, and victim. Most people, Berne argued, find their identity in one of those roles. And for him, the role had always been the rescuer. He was the one who solved tension, fixed moods, carried the unspoken weight. He didn't do it to control. He did it because somewhere in his childhood, it became a currency for love. But now, in this moment, he didn't offer anything. And he didn't collapse. The people around him kept talking. The room didn't fall apart. The silence didn't accuse him. It simply passed, like a breeze no longer needing to be redirected. He looked around and noticed his own hands, relaxed. His breath, slower. His body, still present, but not leaning forward. And for the first time, he wasn't a role. He was just a person in the room. At first, the lack of usefulness felt like irrelevance. He had always equated contribution with value. If you weren't fixing something, you weren't needed. And if you weren't needed, you could be forgotten. But now, something else appeared, not through doing, but through not doing. Presence, not as performance, not as a soft smile or a ready opinion, just as existence without function. There's a shift here that only someone who's lived their life for others will fully understand. Being useless without panic. It's not about detachment or apathy. It's about finally accepting that being is not something you earn by service. It's your default state. You already deserve to be here, even when you don't offer anything in return. That night, he walked home and didn't replay what he could have added to the conversation. He didn't worry if they noticed he was quiet. He didn't follow up with an overthinking text. He just walked. And when he got to his room, he turned off the light. Not because he was tired, but because nothing needed to stay on. No role to play. No energy to prove. Just rest. Full, quiet rest. For the first time, silence didn't feel empty. It felt like freedom. When you finally speak without explaining, defending, or adjusting, that's you. There wasn't a grand revelation. No dramatic scene. No perfect conversation that tied it all together. Just a moment, alone, at the end of a quiet day. He was standing in the kitchen, making tea. No noise. No expectations. And out of nowhere, he said something aloud. Softly, maybe just to the room. Maybe just to himself. I don't owe anyone an explanation for existing. And it didn't feel like defiance. It didn't feel like anger. It felt like clarity. For the first time, his voice didn't sound like a defense, or a strategy, or a carefully phrased peace offering. It didn't sound like a performance tailored to be acceptable. It sounded like someone who had come back from far away, slow, unsure, but fully there. Eric Berne would call this the return to the adult ego state, the self not governed by childhood contracts, not trapped in the shadows of parental voices or social roles. Just a person with a body, a mind, a voice, choosing what to say without needing it to be approved. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't powerful in the way he once imagined healing would feel. There was no applause, but something shifted in his posture. His shoulders didn't rise with anticipation. His jaw didn't clench. His breath stayed even. And when he heard his own words, there was no internal recoil. Just recognition. This is what I sound like. Not the child seeking safety. Not the partner overcompensating. Not the friend proving loyalty. Not the employee playing nice. Just him, saying something that didn't need to be useful, or soft, or timed just right. And in that, he understood. The most radical thing isn't to fight the world or convince others you've changed. It's to hear yourself, without distortion, and not flinch. He didn't write it down. He didn't make a speech. He just sat quietly in the stillness that followed. The room didn't ask for anything. The world didn't demand a role. And for once, he didn't offer one. Not because he'd finally found the answer, but because he'd finally stopped asking for permission to be. The tea went cold. He didn't mind, because he was warm for the first time in years.